Welcome to BIPACT News on the Jewish TV channel. I'm Andrew Pessin, your campus correspondent and also campus bureau editor for the Allgemeiner, a leading news source for all matters concerning Israel and Jews. Please sign up for the daily newsletter at allgemeiner.com to stay abreast of all the relevant news, as well as following us here at BIPACT. I also moderate a Facebook group called Anti-Zionism on campus, so come join us if you're on Facebook, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for all your campus news. On a side note, I've just published a fun new novel called Bright College Years about how college used to be before they all went crazy, so please feel free to check that out. For more about me and my work, visit andrewpessin.com. As for the campus scene for Jews in Israel, it's hard not to think we are entering dark times eerily reminiscent of earlier very dark times. In 2018, I published a book called Anti-Zionism on Campus, documenting not merely the hostility, but serious hatred of Jews in Israel on many campuses, which had already begun transforming from expressing opinions to discriminatory and harassing behavior. It's only gotten worse since then, as Jews, in particular Zionist Jews, but in fact all Jews, are genuinely under assault, verbal and often physical, on many campuses. Since the barbaric Hamas massacre of October 7th, it's only gotten even worse, and it's now hard to deny that Israel and Jews on American campuses are in an emergency existential situation. But it's not just pro-Hamas students who are the problem. Arguably, the deeper problem is the presence on many campuses of brazenly, openly pro-Hamas faculty, along with a growing perception among Jewish and pro-Israel faculty that they need to hide their Zionist identities if they want to get along and succeed. Indeed, there's been a general uptick in efforts to silence and marginalize Jewish and Zionist faculty, sometimes taking the form of screams for Zionists off campus, and a similar effort going on, not just on the campuses, but in professional associations, unions, and the like. Perhaps no one is better situated to monitoring, documenting, and understanding the phenomenon and doing something to combat it than today's guest, Miriam Elman, Executive Director of the Academic Engagement Network. Miriam is with us today to update us on the campus situation, let us know what her organization is doing to try to confront it, and perhaps let us know how all of us can best contribute to the battle. Welcome, Miriam. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's a pleasure and an honor. You've actually long been one of my personal heroes, both
Likewise.
thank you, as a scholar and certainly as a leader. And when you took over the Academic Engagement Network a few years ago, that was such a wonderful moment for me, thinking it had wonderful leadership till then, but I really felt we were going to go to new places, and indeed we had. So let me start by asking you to tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into this line of work.
Great. Well, I was a faculty member for 20 years. And like most professors, I did my research, I published my books, I did my teaching. And a mutual colleague of ours, Andy Giltroy, likes to say that those of us who are doing this work, like you and me and others who are faculty, in this line of work, all have their Herzl moment, their moment when some incident or some issue just made them realize that they can't really sit back anymore. They can't sit it out. They have to help students and do more, get more involved. And for me, it was the winter of 2008, 2009, during the Hamas-Israel hostilities then, where I was invited to just an ordinary academic panel. And the audience did not want to hear any reasoned arguments informed by disciplinary perspectives. It was a court-martial. Israel was in the dock. We had to end the panel early. No one thought of having security at academic events back then. It was the first time I really felt unsafe on campus. And from there, I guess the rest is history. I became the go-to person for Jewish Zionist and Israeli students and staff. And when the AAN lead position for executive director opened up, I took an administrative leave. 1 year turned into 2 years, turned into 3 years, and I retired early to stay on and do this work, which is incredibly important. And it's really a privilege to be able to work with incredible faculty and incredible staff on my team.
That's wonderful. You were at Syracuse University,
Yes,
am I right?
yes.
Yes. I think my Herzl moment was the Roman destruction of the temple in the first century. When I first learned about that, I realized we had problems as a people. But I think that's very insightful, Professor Troy. Each person has that moment exactly when you
Yes,
realize it's not about scholarship here. There's a deeper, scarier battle going on, and we really are fighting for our right to be on these campuses in the same way that Israel is fighting for its right to exist. For me, it was a personal attack that I suffered, and I was aware of things prior to that, but when it came home as your like to your campus, right? You suddenly
yes,
realize because your campus feels like your home until this moment happens. So anyway, I share with you that
yes,
that eye-opening and scary moment. So tell us a little bit about the Academic Engagement Network. What
yes.
exactly, when did
Happy
it
to
start
do
and what
that.
is it? Yeah,
Yeah, some of your listeners and viewers may know of it already. We are an educational nonprofit. We were founded in 2015. So we're soon going to be in our 10th year, having our 10-year anniversary. We're relatively young in the space. Many other organizations that focus on campus anti-Semitism were launched after 9/11, and many existed for decades before, some of the legacy organizations, of course. But we were founded to be the faculty voice, to mobilize faculty, uh, Jewish, Zionist, non-Jewish. We're not a Jewish organization. We're not an Israel advocacy organization. We really, founded to advocate for our mission, and we've stayed true to that. A robust discourse about Israel on campus, free of hate. We promote academic principles of free expression, academic freedom. We support Jewish and Zionist students and faculty who are being demoralized, isolated, denigrated for their identities. And that's been a mission that's grown over time. Initially, we tended to fight a lot of boycott and BDS campaigns, originating out of student government. And we're sort of back in that, doing a lot more of that this year.
right,
But in recent years, we've realized not only do Jewish students need support, need a network of faculty to stand up for them when they're being ostracized and demeaned and denigrated for their Zionist identities. But faculty also need that support. That faculty, as you mentioned in your introduction, are also facing these same challenges, and
right,
particularly in some disciplines and faculty who aren't yet tenured, they're vulnerable, and they are self-censoring. They feel there are professional risks to being outed as a Zionist. That's
mhm,
just unacceptable, and it's something that we work at AEN. Um, we also do a lot of work on the denigration of academic principles and values.
yeah,
So we partner with other organizations that care about those issues, that aren't necessarily in the campus anti-Semitism space, but care a lot about viewpoint diversity, open inquiry, campus free expression. We're very much aligned with those organizations. So we do have allies in the space.
what can I ask, what would be a couple of those organizations in particular?
Yes. So, for example, the new Academic Freedom Alliance, which actually has a number of leaders who are in AEN, and I'm a member of that organization. Another one might be Heterodox Academy,
Right,
that also cares a lot about viewpoint diversity, and doesn't like to see orthodoxies established in any discipline, right? And we are seeing that in the
right,
discipline around Israel studies. So there's an alignment there. I think that insofar as we are very committed to opposing academic boycotts, so too are other organizations. And some of them, frankly, Andy, need to speak out more about
yeah,
that. So we sort of give them the nudge and the push and the
yeah.
encouragement to do that.
I find it quite so. I find the following phenomenon quite fascinating. Tell me some of your thoughts on it if you'd like, which is that the other side, the anti-Israelists, and at this point, I'm comfortable calling most of them pro-Hamas because they're openly pro-Hamas. They're not even pro-Palestinian. They're specifically pro-Hamas, both in content and in their methods. So the pro-Hamas contingent, they often frame their advocacy as demanding free speech, right? They claim that they are being restricted from their speech, and they say they're in favor of free speech too. So I wonder, are both sides being suppressed? This, when we frame our struggle in terms of maximizing free speech, are we right and they're wrong? How do we reconcile those competing visions?
In terms of the volume of cases, it is so skewed in the
Yeah,
way that Jews, Zionists, and Israelis have their speech suppressed.
yeah,
And I can just give you, a great example is if you look at all these petitions and open letters and that come out on either side, right? So on the detractor side, you will see scores of graduate students, assistant professors, right? These are the most vulnerable faculty. They're not yet tenured. They might be part-time.
on the job
They have their
market.
whole career ahead of them.
Right.
They have no problem signing
Yeah,
any of these documents. They will sign it unread. They will sign their name. They will sign their institution because there's no professional costs to
yeah,
doing that. Whereas our faculty, and many of them say, I can't sign. I will lose my job if I am identified as in alignment with even sort of an innocuous statement that's just Israel has a right to exist and the Jews have a right to self-determination. And no, Israel is not actually perpetrating a genocide. Okay, so, the most sort of innocuous statements that even call for peace and support Palestinian humanitarian concerns and relief and all that, they feel they have to sign anonymously. So that is a huge, that is actually hard evidence of the way in which it's really our side that's facing the suppression and the feel of need to self-censor, and the other side just screams from the rooftops.
yeah,
Now, there may be some isolated incidents, and I think, any incident of speech suppression needs to be examined and investigated, but the weight of evidence and the weight of cases just there,
yeah.
is really not on their side. I'll mention one more thing, and this gets to, post October 7th and what's becoming really concerning to us in AAN and to our faculty members is the way in which the anti-Israel movement has really taken advantage of this very volatile, charged, and emotionally fraught situation to dust off all these old academic boycott campaigns and
Yeah.
bring them to the fore. And you now have chapters of Faculty for Justice in Palestine, these sort of organized groups on over 100 campuses. You can read their mission statements. They're quite brazen. They put them
Right.
up on the web. They put them up for public viewing. They're not just anti-Zionist or divisive. They are pro-boycott. They are
Right.
pro shutting down academic freedom and inquiry. So any argument that they have that we are supporters of academic principles is just completely hypocritical, false,
Right.
and they think we're not going to notice. We notice.
Right. And
So
I, to me, that's the part that stands out vividly. Academic boycotts are so obviously inconsistent with fundamental principles of
yes,
academic norms. And they are open calls to suppress free speech. I mean, it's exactly what they are. And of course, they go very far. It's not just suppressing free speech. They want to also make sure that, for example, that students on our American campuses don't ever hear from an Israeli, don't ever hear
right.
the Israeli point of view, don't ever meet Israelis, because God forbid they find out that the narrative isn't the one that the pro-Hamas people are
Right.
pushing. So,
That's actually baked into the principles and the strategies and the tactics. It's not just
right,
an institutional boycott, although they like to claim that. It's actually caught, the effort is to cause maximum harm to Israeli scholars and students and to prevent any kind of dialogue or exchange, except where you would bring in, a virulently anti-Zionist Israeli. Those are the token
right,
Jews that are trumpeted out and brought out all the
right,
time,
right,
right? But other
right,
types of scholarship in the peer review canon, they do not want students to be exposed to that. And that's
right,
why when we do a petition like we just did to get, scholars all over the world to voice their opposition to academic boycott, we get scholars like Michael Walzer, who is on the left, as you know, famous philosopher on the left, to sign. I mean, he will sign.
Right.
So, our position is the right position. We are on the side of the angels when it comes to these issues, and they are not. They
Right.
are reactionary,
Right.
divisive, against academic principles, and quite frankly, as we've seen since October 7th, in many ways, anti-American,
Yeah.
and dangerous, with
Dangerous.
dangerous affiliations.
Right. Would you mind elaborating on that? Because I think that's certainly an important point that others need to realize. And here we could get on into more controversial territory, of course. When you realize they're anti-American, you realize they are a threat to larger things than merely the Jewish community.
Right.
And that's important for, let's say, the neutral bystanders, let's hope, which is the majority of Americans who may not be Jewish, they're not invested in this issue. They care about a whole bunch of other things than this endless conflict in the Middle East. For them to begin to realize, for the average American to realize that what we're seeing on campuses isn't merely an attack on the Jews or on Israel, but it's an attack on Western values in
Well,
America,
right.
it's important to mobilize
Yes.
that group.
Yes.
So if you could say a
I
little
mean,
more.
we've seen it with flag burnings, right?
Right.
About the American flag, and with the rhetoric that isn't just virulently anti-Israel or virulently anti-Jewish or anti-Zionist.
Right.
It actually is also calling for jihad in America, right?
Right.
And I want to say this, and this is something we share with administrators who we work with and we partner with, and we help to educate so that they can implement better policies and practices. That the average 18, 19-year-old kid that gravitates to an anti-Zionist protest or an encampment, or is not a terrorist, right? That kid is manipulated, bamboozled, has the wool pulled over their eyes, right? I mean, they come in, they think this is, I'm for social justice, and they kind of drink the Kool-Aid. But what the administrators, what the university leadership has to understand is there are very powerful, very well-oiled, very well-funded organizations off campus, national and international, that are providing a lot of the materials, that are providing financial support, that are providing the propaganda, that are really manipulating the students. That's not right. That's not fair. And that is something that the university needs to better understand, appreciate, and figure out what they're going to do. I mean, we don't want to have our universities become fortresses and closed off to the community, right?
Right.
We like that exchange, but the downside of that is that just about anybody can come onto the campus, and we've seen that. And ideologically, there's we saw, for example, Andy, on October 8th, just one day after the mass atrocities, when Israel had not yet launched a military counteroffensive, was still picking up body parts and still clearing out terrorists who were roaming the country, in the southern part of the country, and missiles were being lobbed. So just 24 hours later, there were multiple organizations that called for protests.
Yeah.
And called for support of Hamas as
Right.
legitimate resistance.
Right.
One of them was Sami Dun, that has documented ties to the PFLP. It's not my thinking, my thought, my idea. This is documented by multiple credible organizations, and the PFLP is a US designated terror organization. We need to be concerned that Sami Dun is calling for a campus campaign.
Right.
And I think
on October 8th, right?
on October 8th,
when the Hamas
October
campaign is
8th.
still ongoing. They're calling, and indeed, Students for Justice in Palestine, as you know, the national organization, put out a toolkit the next
Right.
day calling to not only praising the resistance, the mass atrocity of October 7th, but calling, and this was their language, to bring the resistance to campuses that Thursday, just a few days
Right,
later,
right.
openly identifying with this terrorist movement. This is
And
a campus,
I'm
a
glad
student
you
campus
mentioned
organization.
it, Andy, because that toolkit also had a, as you recall, a propaganda flyer to use for
Hmm.
promoting and advertising your protest on that day in October with a hang glider on the messaging.
Right,
There were some, we know this from student-facing organizations, there were some leadership of some SJP chapters on campuses that said, I'm not using that flyer. That's disgusting. I'm not using a flyer that's going to
okay,
tarnish what, but look, over 80 did. Over 80 did. So I don't want
right,
to say that all the students should be completely exonerated and they have no responsibility or no agency. They do have a responsibility to know, what are you doing? What are you using? Is that going to impact your peers? And when you violate student codes of conduct, and we know that in many of the cases it wasn't just off-campus agitators or provocateurs
right,
that were arrested, it was students. You're an adult, start behaving like one and own it. If you want to be involved in civil disobedience, there are consequences for that. There's a cost
right,
you're going to have to pay. And so, our faculty spent a lot of time dialoguing with students and with administrators over that flyer and that toolkit.
right,
And in some cases, here's the positive, we're actually able to educate and say,
yeah,
you really want to use this? And in some cases, they said, no, we
right,
actually don't want to use this. But you need to be educated. You need to have
right,
that space to have that
right.
engagement with the students.
Let me just add one more point there. So that same toolkit, I'm less inclined to exonerate than even you are, the students. I feel they are quite culpable. That toolkit also, not only did it promote the homicidal hang gliders to promote the event, but
Yeah,
they also said openly, we are not in solidarity with this movement, meaning Hamas and the resistance, but we are part of the movement, right? They chose that language. This is the leading student organization that organizes anti-Israel activities on
right,
campus, openly identifying themselves as part of the Hamas
right.
movement. And then we switch gears. Faculty for Justice in Palestine, which just sprouted up like mushrooms practically overnight after October 7th, openly identifies and affiliates with Students for Justice in Palestine. And now we're talking about the adults, right? The
Right.
adults who know and understand. And this is why I'm very comfortable calling the movement a pro-Hamas movement, because they openly identify. So with that in mind, tell us a little bit about some of AEN's past initiatives, and then we'll come to the most recent initiative.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what
yeah.
kinds of things are you doing on campuses?
Yes. So as I say, we've been around for 10 years. A lot of what we do is behind the scenes. So where you don't have a crisis, where you don't have a protest that gets out of hand, where you have positive engagement and dialogue, it's often because our members are bringing, that viewpoint diversity and encouraging and modeling the civil engagement and what a professor is supposed to be, right? So these are kind of the non-events, which are sometimes hard to
They don't make the
cover.
news.
They don't make the news, but they
Right.
are the positive stories.
And
But I will tell
let me
you,
just interrupt you. It's worth
yeah,
noting on that point. I don't know what the final tally was, but there were something like 150 campuses that had these encampments at the end of spring. But there's like 3,000 accredited higher education institutions
right.
in North America. So we don't hear about the 2,800 that didn't have encampments. We only hear about the 150 or
And
whatever it was
those
that
that
did.
even sprouted out and in a day were done
We're not
because the
right.
university did the
Not to
right thing.
diminish the problem. It's still a serious, serious
No,
problem.
not
But
to diminish the problem
yeah,
and the fact that many of those 80 or so campuses are campuses that produce our thought leaders.
yeah, exactly,
And there's a
exactly.
reason for that. They are the ones that are targeted.
Yes.
But let me go back and say, some of the just two, so that we can move on to the now. But we partnered with the Anti-Defamation League a couple years ago on faculty letters of recommendation.
Mm,
So there were all these anti-Israel faculty that were declaring, I am not going to write a letter of recommendation for a student that wants to go to Israel. And we were like, you have got to be kidding me.
Right.
You know, have whatever view you want, but you are going to actually deny an educational opportunity to your student because of your own pet political perspective? No. So we partner with ADL. We wrote a great policy. It's up on our website for faculty letters of recommendation, and we sent it to over 300 university leaders with ADL, and it got adopted into policy and into faculty manuals. So I would
Wonderful.
say that was a success story. And then another initiative, when I came on in 2019, we were seeing a lot of departments starting to bake anti-Zionism into their mission statements, sort of baking political orthodoxies about Israel into department pedagogies up on their official websites. Then we saw in 2021, scores of women and gender studies did that. And as departments, not as individual faculty members, but departments. And we were the first in AN to say that is not acceptable. The department does not speak for the university, and universities need to weigh in and prevent that and get those statements off of official websites. We've been largely successful, and a number of our kind of aligned organizations have now adopted that position, that departments should not be issuing one-sided statements that chill speech, that students don't feel comfortable coming in, and where junior faculty are silenced and feel censored. So that's becoming more of a mainstream position, and I would say that has been a successful effort in that we haven't seen as many of those cases this time around, even though it's been horrible in so many other ways.
Right.
In terms of department statements, there have been a handful, and in most of the cases, we've been able to get universities to remove them.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So,
right, small victories against a tsunami, but my own view is we have to fight the small things as well as the big things. The small things lead to the big things very, very quickly, and we're seeing that certainly through the student protests because they faced no pushback. They just kept and keep on escalating, right? And so each one of these things is small, but cumulatively absolutely essential. So bringing us up to the now. So the AEN, I know, has just recently launched a new initiative called the Faculty Against Antisemitism Movement. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired that and what that movement plans to aspire to?
Happy to do that. And I don't think it would have happened without October 7th and just the way in which our members, our longtime faculty members, just became so outraged and fed up to here of what they were seeing on the campuses and wanted some kind of a different way, a different mode of engagement. I mean, we did a lot of statements, open letters, petitions. Cumulatively, we brought about 10,000 non-AN faculty members to sign those petitions, calling for civil dialogue against anti-Semitism. And so that kind of led us to think, how can we mobilize more of that silent majority? So the detractors are noisy, they're obnoxious, they need to be brought down a peg. They need to understand what their rights and responsibilities are as faculty. I still think on most campuses, they are a noisy minority. They like to think they're the majority. The majority, as with I'm a political scientist, so I know about the silent majority, how you mobilize, how hard it is to mobilize a silent majority. But we need to get the majority of faculty on campuses don't have skin in this game, a dog in this fight. But they do care about academic principles. And the more we can showcase to them the egregious outrages of the detractors, the more we can explain to them where this is coming from and give that information, the more they come to our side. And the Faculty Against Antisemitism Movement is a way for our members to gain more of those allies on campus, because not everyone's going to become an AN member. We purposely only grow by about 50 to 100 faculty a year because we really only have a membership of doers. our faculty are ones where I can pick up a phone and they will drop everything to go to help students at a student government. Or we're not just a listserv, or there are other great organizations
Right.
that have 40,000 faculty members, whatever. They're like an information listserv so that you can get information. We have the only organization that has a membership model. And our members are the ones that need the support and the help of all these other faculty allies who are reasonable and can be persuaded and can support them when needed. So that's the idea of this initiative. We're giving out pins and bracelets, and
This
we have a
merch.
lot of swag. There's like a poster for your office store. There's a mug.
Right.
And what we want our faculty to do is, like, they're almost like walking billboards. They go around campus with the t-shirts and the hat and the swag, and they get conversations going among potential allies.
So tell us how you're reaching those out. Is it that way, by just encouraging faculty to walk around advertising for the conversation, or is there some other way we're reaching that silent majority?
So that's a big part of it. And also we're doing a big sort of social media engagement, which is a little new for AEN. Most faculty, as you know, don't do Instagram. But students are on there. So we're sort of bringing students and faculty together in new ways, and helping students to realize there are these pro-Israel faculty that can be relied on and turned to, and then they will do joint actions on, say, we have faculty all around the country wearing FAAM swag, speaking at pro-Israel rallies on campus. Some of them organized by Chabad or Hillel or other organizations, but they took the mic.
Right.
And that's very new. We marched in the Israel Day Parade a few weeks ago on Fifth Avenue with a big banner, Faculty Against Antisemitism Movement. It was the first time we had ever organized something like that. Our faculty really want to be more visible in supporting Jewish identity and opposing anti-Semitism, not just writing an article or writing a petition, which is still important.
Right.
But they want to be able to go to a professional association wearing the t-shirt and be able to say, I'm here and I will not be dismissed. I will not be rendered invisible, and I will not be demoralized. And we think that in a way that is taking a page from the other side that does do that kind of visible scholar activism.
Right.
But we are not obnoxious, and we are not undermining anybody else's right to advocate or speak or have their support. We're not anti any other student community.
Right.
So there's also chapters being formed around the country, Andy, and FAAM is, with the funding we raised for it, we are helping faculty to go to Israel on solidarity missions. We are supporting these new chapters, like, Faculty and Staff for Israel, Faculty and Staff Against Antisemitism, whatever names they want to come up. It's very it's very grassroots in a sense. We are the grassroots one. They are we don't get any money from any governments, or, they're the ones that, and I'm really glad actually that Congress is now investigating this, because I've long said it's not something AEN is going to do. It's really Department of Justice and Congress that needs to investigate, where is this money coming from? How can they do, I know, because I know what it takes to put up a social media campaign.
Right.
This snazzy website for Faculty for Justice in Palestine, it cost a pretty penny. Where are they getting this money from, right? I mean, that's what needs to be investigated.
Right. And as people were saying, where'd all the tents come from? And, things like that. There's money behind this movement. I think you cannot overestimate what you're talking about here is being visible and being heard, because the climate we're in now, as you mentioned earlier, it's orthodoxy is too tame a word for it. There's only one acceptable opinion that dominates public discourse on many, many campuses. And the overwhelming majority of people who speak support it. I think there are a silent majority who question it, but the atmosphere on many campuses is such that it's really painful and scary to speak up. Once you are tarred as a Zionist, and you might not even be defending Zionism, you might be saying, you know what, I'm against academic boycotts. That's really inconsistent. Well, then you're a Zionist because that policy is supporting the
And
Zionists at the
somehow
moment,
you're
right?
a racist by being a Zionist.
And
That
you're
is
a
the
racist
new
and
flavor of the day.
and you're pro-genocide. If you
Right.
say I believe in academic freedom, that becomes racism and pro-genocide now. So the social stigma, the professional stigma of speaking up is very, very high. And to be, on my campus, I'm the only one who speaks up openly for Israel, and I'm a conflict averse person, so it is not natural to me. But it's not my Herzl moment, but this is to me, it's an existential moment, and if I don't, it's all over. That's how it feels to me.
I thought a
And
lot of faculty in our network felt that way. They
yeah,
said, I can't sit back anymore.
right, right. And to know, first of all, for a faculty member, right, that we're not alone in this, that even you might be alone on your campus or in your immediate vicinity, there are other faculty at other places. So unifying is important, but just being visible. And I want to also do a public thank you to AEN. Amongst the things you offer and support, the faculty on my campus shortly after October 7th organized a lecture series, which they called an educational series, Connecticut College educational series on Israel and Palestine, as if the college approved it. And they called this educational, and it was 7 Zoom lectures by one Israel hater after another. So that's what constituted education. Essentially amounted to saying Hamas just slaughtered, at that time, 1,400 Jews, and now we're going to give you 7 lectures to explain why they all had it coming, right? It was so
Yeah.
repulsive, and it was sprung up overnight. So again, it made me wonder, all right, where'd the money come from? It costs money to bring people in, etc. And they at least had a team to do this because they're the dominant vocal people. I was all alone, but I reached out to AEN, and AEN was generous enough to give me sort of an emergency grant so that I could bring in a series of speakers to at least balance out that onslaught. And to be visible in that way, I'm the only one that did it, but I heard from a number of students, and I've heard from a number of students' parents, Jewish students' parents in particular, saying, thank you so much for being the one voice who speaks up. Thank you. My student feels safer on that campus because they know they have a faculty member who's an ally. So
That's right.
being visible, being heard, even if you're alone, it's hard, is so essential. And so that sounds like this is what the FAAM initiative
Yes.
is up to.
Yes, yes, yes. And if we get more people to be talking about how to make for a healthier campus climate next year, and to be supportive of you and others on it, in
Right.
that is a large goal. So they don't have to become members of AAN, but they can support Andy Pessin, right?
Right.
When you need that support on your campus. And I think that that is also a way for the community, for students to realize that there are faculty who won't stand for this, and they can turn to them. And
Right.
so, it's very much aligned with AN's mission, but it's just a way to boost what we're already doing in this moment.
Right. So speaking of that, what do you think is going to be the big issues in the fall, assuming the war is still ongoing, which it looks like it will be? What are you anticipating this fall?
Right. Well, in many respects, the anti-Israel movement, the national, international movement, has seen what has transpired as a win, and particularly on campuses where the administration capitulated and made deals with the encampment protesters. At the same time, there is a certain fatigue that has set in on a lot of campuses, that they may recognize that people are tired by the outrageous behavior. And I mean, the poop tents on the quad, the massive vandalism and destruction of property, the egregious anti-Semitism, not just rhetoric, but like preventing people from coming across campus and having this in the classroom. So there are a lot of people that have had enough, and if anything, the anti-Israel movement is not stupid. So I think that they will be pretty savvy in the fall. I think we can expect more campaigns that are faculty dominated, because that will look more serious, not poop tents, but faculty spearheading things through this Faculty for Justice in Palestine
Right.
initiative. I think that will continue to grow, and we need to mobilize against that, which is also part of FAAM,
Right.
right? Creating chapters to mobilize against that. So I think it will look different on different campuses, particularly where there were capitulations.
Yeah.
Expect to see more egregious behavior. They will ratchet it up there.
Great. Great. And then lastly, what can viewers, listeners do to help support AEN in its work and help and support just Jews and Zionists on campus in general?
So this is great. Thank you so much for ending with this question. There are over 50 student-facing organizations that focus on campus anti-Semitism and supporting Jewish and Zionist and Israeli students. God bless them all. God bless all of them. But we are the only faculty-facing organization with a membership model on campus, and nothing that we do comes cheap. So insofar as listeners and viewers can donate to AEN, we do have a donate button on our website, and we would very much appreciate support. But it's not just financial. If viewers, listeners are speaking with students, are in positions to speak with administrators, ask, are you working with Jewish and Zionist faculty? Do you know who the Jewish and Zionist faculty are? Because we know an organization that mobilizes them and organizes them, right? So there's ways to raise the visibility of the faculty voice in the faculty space that sometimes gets sidelined. People think it may be a lost cause, or they think students and university leaders, they don't really think of this space of the employees who are there for sometimes 20, 30, 40 years, know where the dead bodies are buried, know who the allies are, and can really help to move things forward. I'll just share one thing and then to close out, but the recent congressional testimony where President Holloway from Rutgers was in the hot seat. I watched the whole thing, I'm sure you did. At one point, one of the committee members picked up a sheaf of papers and said, this is an open letter that was written by Jewish faculty and staff at Rutgers that lists all the anti-Semitic incidents since October 7th and provides a great set of recommendations. And they have over 500 signatures. And have you spoken with JFAS, which is our members, Andy? That's all AEN members who organize and lead, and they're the ones who did the petition. And here was a congressman, holding up and Holloway said, well, I don't know. Did we speak with them? Have we? That is a great example of what listeners and viewers can do. Say, we know there's this organization, we know there's these faculty on the campus that have a list of recommendations. They want to be a constructive partner. Have you talked to them? And I think that will really be helpful for our cause and helpful for the faculty and helpful for the students.
Wonderful. To that, I will add, I'm aware of many of the student-facing organizations, and as you said, God bless them. They do important, essential work. I'll particularly give a shout out to Stand With Us and Students Supporting Israel, and there are others who do essential work for students. But what's underappreciated, and I agree with you here, is how important the faculty are. And the faculty, in my view, have really become instigators. There's definitely some student instigators, but the faculty give the green light to this stuff. And as the faculty have become overwhelmingly, as you said, orthodoxically anti-Israel over the past 10 years, they are literally breeding and grooming these students, who most of whom arrive on campus at 18 and know nothing about the Middle East, the history of the conflict, etc. But they take a couple of classes with the relevant faculty, and now they're out there, protesting on the encampment. So the faculty is a serious front, and we've been losing on that front over the last 10 years, and it's really time to engage fully. So I'm so grateful to the existence of AEN for engaging that battle. And I would encourage listeners, in addition to supporting the student groups who do important work as well, to consider supporting the faculty. We need to raise up, give pro-Israel faculty or pro-academia faculty,
Yes.
pro-American faculty, just to go really extreme on that, give them the courage and the resources to stand up and battle back, because that will also have ramifications on the student level as well. So
Absolutely.
Miriam, thank you so much for joining us. That is all for today. Do remember to sign up for the Allgemeiner newsletter at allgemeiner.com. Join my Facebook group. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram for campus news, and certainly check back again with BIPACT. For the Jewish TV channel and BIPACT News, I'm Andrew Pessin. I hope to see you back here soon.